the conservative voice for education reform, Ready Colorado, and Ross Kaminsky with 630 KHOW bring you the 5th Republican gubernatorial governor's candidate interview with former U.S. House Representative Tom Tancredo. Stay tuned for an in-depth discussion about the issues that mean the most to you.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 5th Ready Colorado Gubernatorial Town Hall. This evening, with former Congressman Tom Tancredo, seated right here on my left, we look forward to a very interesting evening of pardon?
And Sasha.
And so, yes, Sasha, Tom Tancredo's dog. Right, there you go. It looks like sort of golden doodle-ish.
That's exactly what she is.
Really?
Yeah, mini
golden doodle.
Yeah.
I won't. All right. And anyway, we got so many things to talk about. We're going to talk about education. We're going to talk about infrastructure. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about marijuana. We are going to talk about a lot of things. Yep, marijuana.
Dope. Oh, my God.
We are going to talk about dope. I would actually like, if I might, Tom, to ask you a question that is combination policy and politics, coming as we are off of this recent election here in Colorado.
Yeah.
What county do you live in right now?
I live in Jefferson.
Okay. So, but I'm curious, I'm sure you have thoughts about what happened in the Douglas County School Board race.
You bet. It's absolutely a disaster. And it's a disaster because about 30% of the Republicans apparently voted for the team, for the union team. And that's what's disconcerting about all of this. Now, I don't know whether they are the folks who simply have the foggiest idea who's running, and so whoever they heard most from, they agreed with. I mean, they voted for. But you have to understand that the teachers' union is so powerful. You know what they did? They gave every teacher a responsibility for a block, okay? And their task was to go out and knock on every door and say, I'm a teacher, and I love these kids. And I'm probably your child's teacher, right? And you can't, here's the team to vote for. Now, you're talking to moms down there, right? And it is a brilliant scheme. They have the money to do it, and it goes to show you that the issues matter less than the emotion behind them. And that's what the left uses so very well.
Yeah, indeed. I think people on the right need to do a much better job of incorporating stories and not just facts and figures in everything we do on policy. Tom Tancredo, you're a storyteller for sure. Hey, for those of you joining us by phone, I want to let you know if you want to ask a question of Tom Tancredo, hit *3 on your telephone. *3 if you want to ask a question of Tom Tancredo. And I want to let you know we're going to spend the first part of the show talking about education, and then we're going to move on to an enormous range of other topics, and I will bring questioners in as appropriate for the topic that we are dealing with at the time. So, for example, I know a lot of you have questions about with Tom on immigration, an issue that he's known to have some views on. We're not going to do those while we're talking about education. You get the idea. So,
unless we're talking about trying to educate illegal alien children.
We'll get to that. We probably will. And Tom's ground rules tonight, by the way, because I know, and we talked about this before. So Tom is Italian and a former congressman. Yeah. So I've given him the most difficult ground rules ever.
Oh, man.
Relatively short answers. Relatively.
Yeah.
For Tancredo.
It could only get worse if you tried to tie my hands down.
All right. So I want to talk to you about charter schools for a minute. Yeah. Obviously, a very big deal in the Douglas County thing. And there were actually 2 reform candidates in Jefferson County as well, who I had on the show. They also did not win.
Right.
Charter schools have been quite successful here in Colorado. I think most people know that they are tuition-free public schools. Maybe not everybody knows that. But right now, their expansion in Colorado can be limited by the local school boards who get to decide whether a charter school can open in a district. A school board can block it. What are your opinions on charter schools, generally speaking? And do you think that school boards should be the ones who have the decision-making authority over to whether to allow a new charter school to open?
Charter schools are the best thing we've got going for us in terms of educational quality. And unless something has changed, Ross, the decision by the local school board is not the final decision. It can go and has oftentimes gone to the State Board of Education. That was the law. I hope I'm not mistaken now that it has changed, but I don't think so. And in fact, the state board has overruled the local boards most of the time because they recognize. Now, this would happen when the Republicans had control of the State Board of Education. They don't anymore. Mm-hmm. So that might change. But for the years that Republicans were in charge, they overwhelmingly supported charter schools and overwhelmingly turned the decision of the local board around. So it is important to have that kind of, I guess, check and balance on the situation because we recognize local school boards, for the most part, hate charter schools. They are the greatest threat to their control of the system, as are vouchers, of course. And so they fight them like crazy. They hate the idea that over and over again, charter schools outperform public schools. And so they come up with all kinds of reasons. Well, they only get the best kids and all this sort of thing. The reality is, of course, quite different. They get the kids, most of them are schools that take kids as a result of some sort of policy that lets them pick. I mean, you have to draw to get in. And so it's not selective in that respect. It's the luck of the draw. Mm-hmm. And yet they do overwhelmingly better than public schools.
And I get, is it safe to assume with that description that you're strongly in favor of charter schools?
No, I don't think so. I
just want to make sure we get that out there, get that clear. So now there are a few states out there, Arizona, Nevada, they've got some programs in place called ESAs. I don't know if you've heard about ESAs, but Education Savings Accounts, right? And the government puts money into those accounts, and the parents then have control over those accounts, and they can use them for all kinds of educational expenses, private school tuition. They can use it for tutors. They can use it for whatever. What are your views on ESAs, and would you support that in Colorado?
They're great, and I would, because the reason is that it is designed, the ESAs are designed to avoid government control that would ordinarily follow the dollar into the school. In this case, it's harder to do that. You put it into an education savings account, the parent makes these decisions, and so it's harder for the government to actually come in and try to, control that process. So I absolutely agree with it. Here's the thing. In 1992, I wrote and gathered the financial support, and ran the campaign to we put vouchers on the ballot here in Colorado. 1992, I did it. We lost ignominiously, probably because of my incompetence in running the thing. But the reality is that there is no greater threat to the government-controlled school system than choice. None. And they will fight it every single step of the way, and they will use every tactic they can. They will couch all of their opposition with the words, the kids. Let's think about the kids. And in fact, Ross, they couldn't care less. The issue is not anything to do with kids. It's everything to do with their paycheck and their control of the system. That's it.
It's interesting that in other contexts, couple times in the last few years, the left put large tax increases on the ballot here in Colorado and marketed them as for the children,
right.
And they lost 2-1.
Yeah.
So the public wasn't buying it. But yet in some of these other issues, it seems like they do buy it. Yeah. I think it's worth mentioning, and I'll mention it even though I would have thought you'd mention it by now, that
I can't get a word in here.
You used to be a school teacher, right?
I most certainly did. I taught 8 years in the Jefferson County Public School System, Drake Junior High. My wife taught for 27 years in that same system. And that's why I hope that para gets solved here.
When you were a school teacher, and we'll get to para, don't worry. When you were a school teacher, were you a union member?
No. And what I did was actually I used to send a check, which I called my negotiation fee, because I couldn't get out of it. They negotiated for all of us, right? And that's the whole idea of the union.
Right.
And they never cashed it. But no, I chose not to participate.
And so I'm curious, right now, I'm sure you know this, one of the things that taxpayer-funded school districts do right now is they take union dues out of teachers' paychecks and pass that money along to the unions. Do you think that's a service the government should be providing to the teachers' unions?
Absolutely not. Because we all know that about 90% of those dollars go are into political races. And they don't ask the teacher whether or not they agree with the politics that they're supporting. They just do it. So I would say that is absolutely, I think it's unconstitutional. It's certainly immoral.
I do too. As long as we're on that, let me ask you a question slightly outside of education. But if you were governor of Colorado, would you push to make Colorado a right-to-work state?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that. One of the things that, again, I'm sure you know, being in touch with education issues, back in, I guess it was 2010, Colorado made some modest changes to teacher tenure rules. What do you think about teacher tenure, and what are your positions there? What would you try to do on that issue if you were governor?
We have tiptoed around it in Colorado. We have tried to touch it so as to satisfy some of the people on our side that demand greater accountability, but in fact do nothing to change the control that actually exists by the teachers' union over the government school system. Look, it is amazing to me. I would give anything, Ross. I would be so happy if, when we started talking about choice, whether it was ESAs or vouchers or anything else, and I know there are people even on our side who don't want vouchers. We can talk about that later, about what are the implications of it and how to nuance it. But the fact is that all of these issues revolving around choice are the ultimate threat to the system. They know it. And I would love to have a teacher union person stand up at any given time and say, bring it on, baby. Bring on the choice. Because you know what? I know our school. I know what I do. I know it's good. I know it's the best. I know that we can compete with anybody. But when they don't say that and only defend the status quo, it tells you they have no faith in the system in which they operate. That's why it is so imperative that we give people greater choice and greater competition in that marketplace. But it's a very difficult thing to do.
You're listening to the 5th Ready Colorado Gubernatorial Town Hall. My special guest, former Congressman Tom Tancredo. And a couple more things that I want to do on education. And actually, I think I'd like to do one with a question from a listener. So hopefully, if there are no gremlins involved this evening, we'll go to Jim on the phones. Good morning, Jim. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, Jim. What is your question for Tom Tancredo?
My question for Tom Tancredo is, since the Senate Bill 20 was passed, 20 cents on every dollar is going to PARA and to support those defined benefits. Now, 20 cents on every dollar for Jefferson County equals $200 million. How are you, as the governor, going to deal with this incredible shortfall that was created by a program that was implemented by the teachers union and by a teacher who carried the bill?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and it's very insightful. You do know a lot about the history of this, and that's great. Not too many people do, frankly, but I'm glad you do. And in fact, the change that has to occur in PARA is significant. The governor, I have to tell you this, and I hate to admit it, but the proposal that he came out with just recently in terms of how to fix it had some aspects that I think are workable. And specifically, he said, I think the taxpayers essentially have paid enough, so we have to go to the individuals involved and to the recipients. I think that is true, frankly. But here's the deal. The taxpayers are paying it no matter where it comes from, whether it's from the teacher, whether it's from the school district, whether it's from the state legislature. It's all tax dollars, either tax dollars going into the pay of the teacher or the money that we give the district, or extra money we take out of the general fund. It's all tax dollars, right? So what I think needs to be done, frankly, is to think carefully about the growth rate that they project, that PARA projects, which is out of sync with reality. First of all, at first it was 8%, then 7%. I'd give anything to have my PERA, my IRA go up every year by the amount of money that PARA projects their investments will go up.
Right.
It's not going to happen, right? So it has to be more realistic in terms of what we can afford. And you can't just keep raising taxes everywhere to pay for higher teacher salaries, to pay for PARA, higher contributions to districts to pay for PARA, and higher taxes on Coloradans in the general fund to pay for PARA.
So, Tom, let me ask you, what do you think teachers and other PARA members would accept? I mean, it was kind of shocking to see John Hickenlooper come out and say basically no more taxpayer bailout of PARA. It's more or less what he said.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing thing to
hear.
I'm
saying.
So what do you think the average PARA recipient right now would say? Would they say, we're promised this stuff and we don't care what happens? You owe it to us no matter what happens?
That's exactly what they'll say.
And what would you say as governor when someone comes to you and says that?
Sorry, kiddo. It cannot continue this way. If you want to make PARA sound, if you want to make sure that and let me tell you something, my wife is a 27-year teacher, 27 years in Jefferson County Public Schools. We get PARA, and it is a pretty significant chunk of our monthly income, right? So I say this, and believe me, I am not Jared Polis here. I don't have $30 million that I can put into a campaign. I was looking at my bank account the other night and trying to think, do I have $30 million? No, I never, it came out. No, I don't. Well, the fact is I have my government pension, we have PARA, we have Social Security, and our IRA. That's it, okay? So I'm not suggesting to you that I have any more resources to deal with this than most of the people that are on it. All I'm telling you is that if you want to continue it, if you want to make sure that you're going to be able to get it in the next 20 years, then we have to do something that you may not like today.
If you're joining us by phone, *3 if you want to ask a question, former Congressman and current gubernatorial candidate Tom Tancredo. And if you're joining us the old-fashioned way, listening to us over the radio waves or on your iHeart app instead of by the dial-in phone lines, you can actually give a call to the studio at 303-713-8255. You can join us that way as well. We're going to hit a quick break here. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more education, but then we are going to move on to issues like immigration, infrastructure, marijuana, and healthcare. So much more to talk about with Tom Tancredo here on the 5th Ready Colorado Gubernatorial Town Hall. We will be back in just a couple of moments.